What is the human capital strategy for NASA? How did NASA respond to the pandemic and keep its workforce performing? I'll explore these questions and so much more with our very special guest, Jane Datta, Chief Human Capital Officer at NASA. So Jane, would you tell us more about the mission of your office? How is your office organized? And would you give us a sense of the agency's scale of operation that the Office of Chief Human Capital Officer supports within NASA?
Sure. Let's start with the mission of my office. We are a end-to-end human capital service office. So what that means is we're in the people business. We are here to provide services to the agency in the HR, or what we call the human capital arena. And we really think about it in terms of people first, mission always. That's our tagline. And the reason is that the people make the business happen. But obviously, NASA's mission is incredibly important. And so I see the job of my office being to support the mission through its people. So the scale of operations is fairly large. We support about 18,000 civil servants who are spread across the country over a number of different lines of business, including human spaceflight and aeronautics research and science missions, some of which have been in the news very recently. It's all an exciting time for our agency. We also support other segments of the workforce, including on and near site contractor staff. So, and of course, we have other segments that we indirectly support. You've got your prime contractors and others, but our primary focus is really on the 18,000 civil servants. Now, my office used to be decentralized, meaning we had, offices in each of our field center locations, and we have consolidated so that I now have direct responsibility for all of HR across the entire agency.
Jane, regarding your responsibilities and duties, what are the top, say, 3 challenges you face in your position, and how have you sought to address those challenges?
There are a lot of challenges, but here are some that are top of mind for me. I'm going to start with the internal human capital challenges. We have a lot to do. With a relatively small group of people, we are on a transformation path. And part of that path is actually figuring out how we get to be more effective and efficient. In particular, we're paying attention to things like automation and improving our HCIT, our human capital information technology footprint. That will help us today, but it will actually set us up for the future in a way that we wouldn't be able to achieve if we only relied on the footprint that we have today. So we have a plan in works looking at that line of business. I think that an opportunity that I've been given is to have a voice in the biggest workforce challenges at the agency level. I know we're going to be talking about COVID in a little while, but the response to COVID remains a challenge for everyone in the world and in the country, and certainly in our agency. So an example of that is, we're very worried about what we hear about workload and employee burnout. I think that caring for the health and welfare of our employees is an ever more important thing for us to pay attention to. And I say that not just as a people leader, but also as a member of the senior leadership team. I think this is a leadership challenge that goes well beyond human capital, but about which I have a particular investment because I understand the value of paying attention to people and their engagement and their wellness. So it's both an opportunity and a challenge right now. I would say, too, that as with most organizations, NASA is not standing still. There's a lot of wonderful stuff happening at the agency. For instance, the commercial partnerships on the human spaceflight side and what we are seeing happening in the world around us. And so, helping to reshape the workforce skills to acknowledge some of those shifts is an example of shaping the agency for the future, which is an opportunity and a challenge. Another example of thinking of the future and figuring out how to help us get there, which is a top challenge, is the future of work and hybrid work, which is not easy for anybody. Nobody has the perfect solution set for this. But I feel I have some influence leadership responsibilities in helping the agency migrate from where it is now in the habits that we've always had, leveraging what we've learned over the last couple of years, and then moving into the future that is actually the best of the pre-pandemic and the pandemic experience.
NASA has had some successes during the past 2 years, even during this pandemic. What has been your experience, Jane, around this particular event? And how did NASA respond to the pandemic and keep its workforce performing?
I would say that I'm really proud of what NASA did. What we did was when we realized in early 2020 that this was not going to go away, it was going to potentially turn into a pandemic, and this was serious business, is that we really brought the leadership team together from the highest levels of the agency. So we quickly assembled a team, and we also said our number one priority is the health and safety of our workforce. And we adhered to that. So in March of 2020, we just sort of, in a very short period of time, I'm talking like the length of a pay period, we said, everybody go home, right? We cannot assure your health and safety on site, go. And so we started there, and then we ended up building over the course of months sort of the frameworks, the structure that we needed to assess what work was going to be going on site, to figure out how we would determine how virulent the COVID was in the localities where we had facilities, how decisions would be made, and then, of course, communications. So we really went from 0 to 100 in a short period of time, and we threw our most senior leadership at this because we knew how important it was, both for the mission and for our people. From my part, I ended up paying a lot of attention to the supervisor cadre. And the reason that I did that is because I always say that supervisors is the layer of our organization where the work and the workforce come together. And so they're in the best position to know what's what at any moment in time and to really help in the caretaking of the workforce. So we set up a supervisor series for the supervisors, where we brought a whole bunch of different topics over the course of time. We did it more frequently than monthly, but we are now in a monthly rhythm and have been for this going on 2 years now. One of the interesting learnings from that series is that the benefit that the supervisors get, and then by the way, we have really, really amazing attendance at these sessions. So clearly there's a need that this is helping, at least in part, to fulfill. But they actually like to hear from each other. So it was in some ways a togetherness, a shared response to a crisis. And you know how it is when you're in what you call a crisis, you want to have other people around you who understand what that feels like and looks like, so that you can feel a sense of belonging and that there's a shared experience and that you're helping each other. And so the supervisor cadre was something that we started and that we will continue into the future because we feel like there's a lot they can learn from each other, even when we're not in a crisis. And so we also, and I don't want to discount the degree to which we as an agency really focused on communications at all levels. And I want to give like the field center leadership, they did the lion's share of that, and we supplemented at the agency level because we knew how important having consistency of message was. And so I think if you put all of that together, it was an amazing display of value for the workforce and the mission, both, right? We need to protect the mission and know what's most critical and keep that going. And at the same time, we want to ensure the health and safety of our workforce.
So, Jane, how will NASA be working when the pandemic, hopefully soon, is behind us?
Well, we declared, as have most agencies, that we will be moving into what we call the hybrid environment. And we're striving to take the best of the experience pre-pandemic, the best of what we've learned during the pandemic, and apply it. I don't want to signal that we've got it all figured out, because we haven't. I think there's a desire to reconnect with people in person. And so I think that what we will find over time, when the constraints related to being together either on site at our work sites or frankly anywhere else, when they lift some and so people have more of a choice, I think it will be more of a mixture of some on site, some remote work, and some more active telework is what I expect. But I have also alerted leadership to the fact that this is an ever evolving situation. I don't mean in a pandemic sense. What I mean is that what we do in the year following lifting of restrictions might give us some idea of how we want to operate for the future, but we won't be all the way there yet. And because of that, we've actually declared that there's what we're calling an experimental phase. We didn't want to fall into the trap of trying to decide too early what we would invest in or divest ourselves of, either from a facilities, office space, or from an IT perspective. But instead give ourselves some breathing room once some of the restrictions, or a sufficient number of the restrictions, have lifted, that enough people have choice that you can start seeing how they behave and what choices they actually make. And so we believe that experimental phase will last for some good part of 2022. Given where we are now with COVID, I think it's been delayed a little. So we're not rushing to judge what our new work patterns are too soon. But we know that it won't look like 2019 or 2018. And we know that it won't look like March of 2020. And what we aspire to do is to, as I say, take the best of what we've learned. But I think in that, our goal is to balance what we need to get the work done, because that comes first, in terms of, if I'm choosing between an in-person meeting or a telework meeting, what are the things that we need to attend to that are most important to do in person, and do those in person and be willing to. So there's that sort of piece of the decision making. But what's really newer is giving employees a bit more freedom and choice, how they work, when they work, how work gets done. And that's the piece that I think we are, really attending to in this experimental phase, to see if we can make it work for us and actually come out the other end and say, hey, you know what? I'm better able to balance my personal needs with my kids or my, elderly parents, or whatever the case might be, in this new world than I was back in 2019. And I just don't think that we're there yet. So I suspect that any given employee will try a few things before landing on the patterns that seem to make the most sense. Same goes with projects and missions at NASA and what really needs to be done where and when. So it's going to be, we will always be learning, but this first phase, I think we're going to be focused on, the adjustment period, and not assuming that we know at the outset what it needs to look like.
That's very helpful. I was wondering, Jane, about your efforts to transform NASA's HR services across the agency. And maybe you could allude for us and outline for us the difference between a traditional HR customer model and NASA's HR business partner model, which I believe, as I understand it, the human capital workforce was consolidated into one organization in October 2018. Maybe you can elaborate.
So I think I mentioned earlier that in the past, we had an HR office at every field center location, and then we had kind of a policy program office at the headquarters, which is the organization that I've been aligned to since I've been at NASA. And about 3-4 years ago, we consolidated so that the human capital organization is one versus a sort of a loosely connected grouping of different HR organizations. So with that came the desire to really modernize and improve the efficiency and the effectiveness. So part of that magic was in the HRBP model, the HR business partner model that you referenced. And so the traditional approach to HR services is, especially at NASA, is that they were very people provided and still are today, but we're shifting that. So what I mean by that is if a customer has a question, they go to a person. And that has been very successful in the past. It's part of our culture of interconnection networks, being very customer driven. Our people really want to understand our customers. We don't want to be responsive through any way other than in really connecting directly person to person in the needs of our customers. The challenge with that model is that it's really hard to get any kind of efficiency in it. First off, because every solution could be a customized solution, and because there's not a lot of interoperability from one field center's operations in an HR office to another. So what we've realized is that we need to really move from an HR business partner answers any question to how can we focus our HR business partners, which is really what the original design was supposed to be. And we are doing that today. We are actually providing consultant services through the HRBP model today. But what we're trying to do is to really clean up some of the other things that they do so that we can really focus our HR business partners on the things that bring the most value to our customers that must be provided by people. So the model of an HRBP is really about understanding overall and ticklish issues that don't have straightforward answers. So what's the health of my organization, and where are there issues, and where do I need org development support, and what about succession planning, and how do the mission needs line up to this talent that I've got in this organization? We do all of those things today, but really it's a focus on that through the HRPPs, which differentiates it from a more traditional model of do everything that comes your way. And instead, what we're trying to do is to take those things that are more process focused, more information sharing focused, and find different ways to deliver those services that actually get at some of the standardization and efficiency that I think that we need in order to be able to really meet the full set of our customers' needs.
Well, it's obvious because NASA always ranks very high in the Partnership for Public Service Best Places to Work survey. And I was wondering, would you tell us more about your success in this area and what has been done to secure it, to make it happen, and lessons you want to share with some colleagues through, the cross-agency, interagency efforts at the Chico Council? What can you tell us more about this?
Sure. We are very proud, but also very grateful that we have been the best place to work in the federal government for large agencies for a number of years. We also don't want to rest on our laurels. It's very important that we realize that attending to our people and the health of our agency is an ongoing work for us. I would say that the differentiators for us start with the mission. As I was saying a little while ago, we are passionate about our mission. And in public service, I think in general, people go to public service because there's something about how you're spending every day on behalf of the nation and the public that just fundamentally matters more than, say, getting a really big paycheck. Since we aren't really able to compete on salary, this is why you come into public service, and in particular why you come to NASA. So that gives us a good running start at this. I also think that the quality of the leadership, starting with the administrator and going to the levels of leadership that all the way down through the supervisors to the employees, the fact that we actively demonstrate that people matter is an important part of getting to the results that we've seen. Connecting people with each other is another thing. We celebrate our missions. There are watch parties, launch watch parties, and a lot of effort to really feel that not only are we proud of missions when they happen, for instance, the James Webb Space Telescope that launched and is now in the process of readying itself. That was a couple decades in the making, and it is one of the most exciting things that I think I have ever seen. So, passion for the mission, but that the mission doesn't happen without the people. And so I think it's a combination of all of what I've talked about. And I also would point to the role of the supervisor. We do very well in the employee engagement, the subsection on supervisors. And it's really clear that people in the main really trust and believe in their supervisors and feel that their supervisors have their backs. I think that has gotten even stronger over this COVID period. They really rely on their supervisors to help them do the balancing and the surviving of the hard things and the connecting to the good things. So I would say that really the engagement index and the global satisfaction index, which are ones that we really pay a lot of attention to from the survey itself, do play to our strengths. It doesn't mean that we can assume that good stuff will happen. We need to pay attention to it, and it starts at the top.
This has been the Business of Government Hour, a conversation with Jane Datta, Chief Human Capital Officer at NASA. Be sure to join me next time for another informative, insightful, and in-depth conversation on improving government leadership and its effectiveness. Until then, subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at Podcast One, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast app. And as always, at businessofgovernment.org.